Hey Chef, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to show you how I care for this absolutely gorgeous jungle cactus. This is the fern leaf cactus. I'm also going to attempt the real name. It is Selenicereus Chrysocardium. I'm also going to show you how to propagate this plant, so let's get into it. This plant in particular is probably a little more difficult to find compared to other similar plants like the rickrack or the fishbone cactus. I think the care will be pretty well the same, but if you get a chance, or if you see one of these, or if you can get your hands on a cutting, I highly recommend it. It is an absolutely beautiful plant. So I wanted to make this video actually quite a while ago, but I didn't have enough experience with it. So I bought this plant, I think it was last summer. So I've almost had an entire year of trying to figure this plant out. So I wanted to make sure that I got the hang of this plant before I made a care video. So it's about a year in the making, I'd say. This is actually my second attempt at this plant. I had a smaller pot that I purchased probably a little more than a year ago. And I'm gonna start off with the light requirements because that's where I went completely wrong with this plant. With it being named jungle cactus, I assumed that because it has cactus in its name, that it required like a ton of light. So the thing that killed this plant, here is the remaining cuttings of it actually. I put this in a very high light location. I put it directly in a west facing window, like on the windowsill, and it scorched the leaves. So that was my first mistake, was not doing enough research and trying to figure out what type of light this plant requires. Now I have it just off to the side of an east-facing window. So it gets a lot of bright morning light, a little bit of direct sunlight. I'll insert a video here of where I have it located, but the direct sun from an eastern exposure is way less intense than, say, a south or a west exposure. It's very, very subtle. So a little bit of direct sunlight from an eastern exposure window is okay, but you want to make sure that it is probably like pulled back from any direct sunlight if it's near like a south or a west facing window. It likes a really bright spot, but where this grows naturally is actually in Mexico, and it latches on to trees. It's actually classified as an epiphyte, so it doesn't get any like nutrients from the tree or anything like that, but it simply latches onto and grows up the tree bark. It'll obtain moisture and nutrients from its little aerial roots here, so it'll soak up the moisture, and that's how this plant grows naturally. So with that setting, you'll have to imagine that with the tree canopy, it probably doesn't get much direct sunlight, so maybe like a little bit of like spotting of direct sunlight throughout the day, but not enough to scorch or burn the leaves. Just a nice, bright, sunny spot that gets a lot of light, but no direct sunlight. Hopefully that's not confusing, but that was my mistake when I first started caring for this plant, is I gave it too much light and it didn't like it. So now I'm going to talk about watering this plant. I'm going to give it some water here in a second, but when doing my initial research about this plant, it was a little bit confusing because there's some conflicting information out there saying because this is a cactus, you should let it dry out completely. And then there's other stuff saying that because this is grown in the jungle setting, it prefers like a more moist or damp soil. For me personally, I've been letting this dry out completely. Right now it is absolutely bone dry. And I think it probably depends on the type of soil that you use as well. Because this is an epiphyte, it doesn't typically sit directly in soil. Like I said, it grows on trees. So you want to make sure whichever soil you use, it is a well-draining mixture. So right now I have mine, I think it's in a cactus succulent mixture, and then I add some extra perlite. But if you want to add some orchid bark as well, just something that is, it holds on to moisture, but not for long enough or for too long that it'll cause root rot, but just something that provides a lot of air to the root structure as well. And it's just, you just want a well-draining mixture. And I'll show you an example here in a second of a mix that I would probably use if I was repotting this again, but yeah, I'm not going to be doing any of that today. Like I said, I'm going to show you how to water it here in a second. You can see the leaves are absolutely filthy. I'm actually going to take this over to my bathroom and spray off the leaves, just make sure it cleans off the leaves of any dust and debris, and then I'm going to give it some water. But I'm actually going to fertilize it as well because you can see it's actively growing. So I will be using this Cactus Fertilizer. It is Schultz brand, and it's just a liquid plant fertilizer. It says to add 7 drops into 1 liter of water, so I'm going to add that to the watering can here. You have to be really careful when you move this plant around, as these stems are pretty delicate, so if you catch one of these large flaps on something, it's going to snap off, and then it doesn't look good. So I bought this larger pump and spray bottle last week. It's super awesome. Okay, so I just started spraying it off. I'm just going to clean the leaves off, give it a little bit of water, and then I'm going to finish it up with the fertilizer there. Just going to give it a good soak. Okay, so I kind of pre-soaked the soil when spraying it off. You don't want to add fertilizer on dry soil, so I like to give it a little bit of water first before I provide the fertilizer. I'm just going to use this little it's like an eyedropper thing. I'm just going to add 7 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and I'm going to mix that up and then give it some water. Where is my mixer? There it is. Okay, I'm just going to mix this up, and then I'm going to just pour it in the pot here. This is a ceramic pot, and I do have a larger plastic saucer. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I did drill a hole in the bottom of this, so I would recommend using a pot that has a drain hole. And without getting my hand in the way, I'm just going to lift this one up, and I'm just going to water it just so it comes out the bottom of the drain hole, so I know it's thoroughly watered. Just going to let it soak through like that. I'm just going to watch the bottom here just to make sure it comes out the drain hole, and that's all I'm going to give it. And I will probably water it again maybe in let's say like 2 weeks is typically how often I water it, every 2 weeks. I don't notice like the leaves getting really droopy or anything like that. I really have to pay attention to the soil. So if it's dry, then I'll give it some water. I don't know if you can see it here, but there is a little bit of like black edging here. This is typically, I found, what happens when it does get dry. The ends get a little bit crispy. See, like right here, it just gets a little dried up. There's a couple pieces here that have actually snapped off, and you can see right here, here's a dry little portion as well. So I like to just remove that. But that's typically what I find happens when you let it get too dry. Another useful way to determine if it needs water or not is actually by the weight of the pot. I can't believe I actually forgot to mention that, but it is significantly heavier right now than it was before. So get used to how the pot feels, or just pick it up when it's dry. Give it some water so it comes out to the bottom of the drain hole, and just feel that weight of the pot again so you can roughly know if it's dry or not. If I was repotting this today, which I'm not, this is the mixture that I would be using. It's ProMix Premium Potting Soil, as well as the Premium Orchid Mix. You can see there's a lot of perlite, well, it's not focusing, but some chunky orchid bark, as well as charcoal. And this is the consistency that I would use. You can see there's lots of perlite in there. There is some of that potting soil, and then these larger orchid bark. So this is a well-draining soil that I would probably be repotting it in if I was doing it today. So yeah, just something like that should be sufficient for this plant. It holds on to some moisture, but it doesn't retain it for too long. And basically what you want is the water to just drain through, soaking the orchid bark, but coming out the bottom of the pot. Propagating this plant is extremely easy. You can take small little cuttings, or you can take larger ones. You can take multiple ones. It's really, really easy. All you do is take your pruning shears, just find a section of the stem like this. I'm just using this one right here, and just make a cut like that. So that way you have this cut portion. Can't even really tell that it has been propagated. And then I have a small little cutting like this. So basically you let this freshly cut end callus over for a couple days, and then you can literally stick it in a pot of soil, and it will root itself, and eventually it gets some new growth, just like this one. This is the original plant that I had, and I put it in that western exposure, basically completely scorched it. I did end up being able to salvage 2 healthy portions of the stem, and that's exactly what I did. I just cut it off and stuck it in some soil. You can see this little section right here is all new growth. It's coming in a little bit deformed, but that's okay. And then you can see right here, it's getting a new little stem or kind of side shoot from this cutting here. So that's how it grows, that's how it propagates. Basically just stick it in some soil. I keep the soil a little bit more on the dry side for the first little while, very similar to succulents. When a plant does not have any root systems, if you like completely soak this soil, there is no roots to utilize that water, so you're probably going to end up with some stem rot. So about a week after I pot it, I will lightly water just around the stem so that it kind of just coaxes those roots to start searching out into the soil. Once you are able to feel resistance, like you cannot pull the cutting out of the soil, that means it is rooted, and then you can probably just water like you normally would. So soak the soil, but let it dry out in between waterings, and that's all I do for propagation. You can see there's many new growth points on this one, and just to show you, that's how they push out a new stem, is just off of like the main stem. You can see here too. Where's my pencil? This is all new growth within the last couple months, so that's why I decided to give it fertilizer today, because obviously it's woken up from its little winter sleep there, and it's pushing out a ton of new growth. You got new growth points all over. I am super excited, and I hope that this plant will eventually get some flowers. If you've never seen a jungle cactus flower before, Google it. They have these large white flowers, and I think most of these jungle cactus, they bloom at night. I do have a Queen of the Night cactus, which I will be making a video on as well. It's getting a bunch of new growth, but if you've never seen these flowers on these plants before, Google it. They are spectacular. I think there's only two other things that I need to mention about this plant, one of them being humidity. I have this upstairs, and it's usually drier upstairs, between kind of that 30 and 40%. So in reality, these don't need like a ton of humidity, or not for me anyways, but these grow in a high humid environment, obviously the jungles of Mexico, so I'm sure it will respond very well to if you have a higher humidity location. So yeah, I have mine in very dry, but it obviously can or does grow in a high humid environment. I haven't had any pest issues or anything with this, but I know they are susceptible to scale. So scale, if you've never seen it, it's like a little round armored bug. It kind of looks like a bump or like kind of a scab. That is scale. So every once in a while, I will just check the back of the leaves as well as the front for those little scab type bugs. And if you see scale, I think the treatment for it is put alcohol on the end of a Q-tip and basically just spray it off, or wipe it off. Depending on the severity of the scale infestation, if you only see a couple, it's probably not a big deal. But if you see a lot, scale is really hard to get rid of. So if you have a scale issue, or if you find it, I would literally just cut this back to the stem. I don't know if scale like lives in soil or not. I think it's just the leaves. I'm not too familiar with scale. I haven't had much experience with it, but I would honestly cut the majority of the leaves off, or even cut them back quite aggressively. It will regrow, but you just don't want to continuously have to deal with scale. So now I'm just rambling on again, but yeah, watch for scale. I think that's the only bug that I've ever kind of read that this plant is usually affected by. So I think that's gonna be pretty much it for this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. Thanks again for all the support. Thanks for watching my videos. Take care, everyone. Bye. Just a little behind the scenes look, a little bonus footage. Just arranging some stuff underneath my plant workshop table here, and then I heard a huge crash. Yeah, I got some cleaning up here to do. So I just started filming, and yeah, this happened. So gotta clean this up and we'll get back to it.